My name is Amy Burnett, and this is the presentation for Submission 91, which is titled the Sustainability Action Platform, a Knowledge Management Mechanism for Advancing Global Sustainability Transitions. And this presentation is going to be divided into two parts. The first part is a summary of a paper that myself and other researchers in an international team have written, which is reviewing different sustainability knowledge action platforms. So we are assessing these in terms of whether they can advance multi-level sustainability transitions. And the second part of our presentation is to present a concept that we have been working on collaboratively, which we've termed Sustainability Action Platform, developing a global exchange for accelerating local transitions. And we believe that this particular concept has many innovative components that can address some of the shortfalls that we've identified in our paper, particularly as they relate to the Sustainable Development Goals. So just a little bit about the authors. We came together through a Future Earth Knowledge Action Network on systems of sustainable consumption and production early last year, looking at how local government in particular could respond positively to the challenges that we faced due to COVID and the pandemic. We are a group of 6 of us, and we are from a practitioner background. We're academics, and we've got research in sustainability transitions, governance, community-led development, planning, anthropology, all sorts of really rich insights into this particular topic. So we've come together and we've worked on this paper as well as developing the concept of the Sustainability Action Platform. So the first part of our presentation is looking at the paper that we have written, which is available on the conference website. Again, the title of our paper is Can Sustainability Knowledge Action Platforms Advance Multi-Level Sustainability Transitions? So we have identified quite a lot of potential platforms. In fact, we identified 198. This was based on all of our different knowledge of platforms. So we created a long list, which had an element of being focused on sustainability, being online, trying to generate knowledge sharing or cultivating action towards sustainability. We haven't completely finished our analysis as yet. We have coded about a quarter of them. So we coded 58 so far. But then we had additional screening criteria where we looked at them carefully and thought, well, is this actually a sustainability action, knowledge action platform? And if it wasn't, then we filtered it down even more. So we actually screened out 16. So in the end, our final set of platforms that we've analysed was 42. So what were we trying to do? We were trying to identify and categorise and assess these sustainability platforms to provide a state of the art in this particular field. And then we wanted to critically examine these platforms in how they were meeting different sustainable development goals. And we also wanted to advance strategies that can accelerate solutions to sustainability issues at different scales and different places. So we didn't want this just to be a piece of research, but we wanted to try and contribute our findings towards building a solution towards this, which we've built in the concept of the Sustainability Action Platform, or SAP. In terms of what we were considering is a digital platform, we've used the definition of a strategy to mobilise and help an ecosystem produce shared value and express its potential. We've also looked at the issues of the SDGs, multi-level governance, as well as obviously the digital platform literature. So we conducted a literature review which informed our methodology as well. We used Excel as a descriptive matrix. So we had various codes that we all coded against, and we have been making sure that there's intercoder reliability in comparing our approaches. So I'll go on to discuss the findings of our research. So this is just a bit of a summary on the literature on digital platforms. So we can multiple platforms may link in a federated structure. You have amalgamation platforms, which are essentially like private networks, and they're more inwardly looking. So examples of this might be where organizations have a sustainability platform, but they might be geared towards only a particular type of actor or only a particular organizational remit. And so they're not really speaking to each other and linking up. And then there's innovation platforms, which has been classified by others as the unobstructed access to a novel digital infrastructure devoid of permissions. We didn't really look at those particular, but we were very much focused on how these existing platforms might be more like private networks. So we can see that the digital economy has got lots of potential to close knowledge gaps and disseminate knowledge about sustainability solutions. It can encourage peer-to-peer exchange. There's lots of apps, there's lots of platforms, there's, you know, Facebook, there's LinkedIn, there's all sorts of different platforms out there. But we were looking at ones in particular that were advancing sustainable action and knowledge sharing rather than these broader remit ones like Facebook and LinkedIn. So we can see that the platforms can help to link actors. So we're all kind of involved in one kind of social media or another mainly. So it's very helpful in facilitating bridging capital between different user groups, as well as helping different sectors come out of their silos potentially and look to how other people are doing it. But also equally, as we know, there are these algorithms embedded in many platforms which can actually create an echo chamber. So these are kind of things that need to be considered as we possibly use technology even more to provide solutions for linking us up to thinking about sustainable action. So there's other things as well that we can consider, like certification schemes and embedding incentives. These can help to create a virtuous cycle in how we think about sustainability and how we can measure it and benchmark it. So these are also things that could be considered within a building of a digital architecture. However, the problem we have is that platforms are quite hard to define. There's lots of definitions. They can be co-opted. People can call themselves a platform, but actually they might not be a platform, or they could be very focused on quite a dominant marketplace, which can actually crowd out other actors. So for instance, you know, if the more popular a platform becomes, the more it can squeeze out other platforms. So how do you ensure that people are going to the best solution for them, while at the same time those that are innovative get the space that they need to have a good user base? So we are looking at digital platforms from the sense of, at the moment, we think it's quite experimental. There's lots out there. In fact, there could be too many out there. There's lots of people also offering similar things. So how can our work help to provide insights into the kind of stabilization of the digital platform scene? So the next element of our literature review was looking at multi-level governance of sustainability transitions. As some of us are well aware, what can be replicated is an approach, but the practices and the activities are very much centered at a local level, and they're not easily replicated. So that is, you know, in the literature on policy transfer, that's kind of one of the key things, is that, you know, you can't just suddenly do something in one place and then it's magically going to happen in another. So understanding why and how these different contexts occur is really important to help build knowledge transfer insights for sustainability in different regions, in different places, in different contexts, etc. However, when there is fractured governance, it can make it quite hard for innovation to be scaled up. So that can lead to silos with people disincentivized to share data. If people are sharing data, it affects accountability, and then people are less potentially inclined to perform well and share information with others. So that's also important in terms of how the governance of a digital platform links to governance kind of within organizations as well. Needs to be attentive to how different places have very different makeup. So you have different buildings and they have different infrastructure, they have different demographics. That is all part of the lesson sharing on why sustainable action may work in some areas and not another. So what we should probably try and bear in mind is that the local knowledge can be essentially cultivated through general guidelines, but then there's always space for adaptation in different ways. And so that's also something in terms of the data and the technology. So how can something that may think like an algorithm, like artificial intelligence, how can it come to kind of learn and work with the social aspects of things being very, very different? You know, can a machine ever learn what a local context looks like? You know, how can people complement very technocentric views and solutions? So we wanted to now show you some information on our findings. So these are the preliminary results from our analysis. So as I said, it is very much that we are in process with this, and we will have a revised set of findings in due course as we continue to review more platforms. But essentially what we're going to say now, I don't think will change too much, but there may be some differences for the paper that you may see eventually. So we found that the most common keywords that were identified within these knowledge action sustainable platforms that we've identified, they related to solutions and sharing knowledge and cultivating action. So that's not that surprising because that's kind of what we're looking at. Interestingly, 57.1% of platforms defined their geographical scope as global. Only 1/3 of our sample explicitly targeted entities based in the global south. So as we know, often there are massive data variations between developed and developing or global south countries, and that is a key challenge for scaling up and out any digital platform architecture. So it was common for platforms to receive financial support from multiple sources. Most of the platforms assessed were free to use, only 10% had a paid for feature. Some, but not all, had an explicit focus on the community or municipal level implementation on the SDGs. And so some would also be national level as well. And we see here in figure 1 that there has been almost like an exponential rise in the number of these platforms that were founded each year. So, you know, you had quite a very low number up until 2016, and then it's gone up quite significantly since then, and it will probably keep rising. But then does that mean that the rapid growth may also be crowding out and confusing the online scene of existing platforms, because users have the option to engage with so many different types of platforms, which is something that we all find, whether it's social media or information overload. You know, there's just, sometimes it feels like there's just too many things out there. So what does that mean in terms of diluting these kind of the offer of sustainable knowledge action platforms? So we've also, in figure 2, you can see here that most of the platforms that we've assessed have been set up by civil society groups or NGOs. Very few were set up by foundations. Again, like very few set up by local or regional government. But other kind of intergovernmental bodies, they've been quite key in setting up these platforms, as well as some more independent ones. So we can talk a little bit more about the types of users in the next slides. So the Sustainability Platform Review found that the SDGs are primarily being assessed for energy, also climate in general. Cities was also quite prominent, less on specific issues around gender, and there was also less on kind of ocean and water aspects as well. So you can see it's quite a varied mix, but generally, you know, most of them are being covered, some to a greater extent than others. But generally, yes, some of them claim to address all of the SDGs, and some were just kind of focusing on essential elements, particularly ones that were focusing on cities in particular. So maybe some of these cities, you know, they're not necessarily going to be having the same considerations or as a more kind of global perspective might, although of course the SDGs cover a wide range of issues for complex situations at many different scales. So in terms of the usability and features, we had in our mind, like there were lots of different potential offers of these platforms. So you could have a compendium where you can kind of search for different actions, or so you want to know something about land use, you can kind of search a knowledge repository on, you know, I want to know about land in South America and any issues relating to housing. So being able to have a kind of searchable database on solutions or information on sustainability. So that was a really prominent feature, focused in over 70% of the ones that we've assessed. Whether or not users could have a profile, that was featured in less than 60% of the platforms that we've assessed. Having a directory of different users, so being able to kind of reach out to people and be able to contact them or know about who they were, that was in just less than 50% of the ones that we've assessed. Having a forum or a chat function, so the chat function was less of an option, but the forum element where people share ideas around particular themes, that was quite prominent, just under 60%. Having a self-assessment aspect was less prominent, so people being able to assess themselves in terms of where they are in their sustainable journey, how well they're doing, that wasn't really that prominent, nor was being able to kind of index achievements or places compared to each other, and nor was a kind of matching of people who were interested in certain topic areas where the platform would actually say, put you in touch with somebody based on what you were kind of looking for. So if you're interested in food, it would help you direct to somebody else who was interested in food. Most of the platforms were in English only. So again, that kind of indicates that there's a bit of a bias going on in terms of being able to really reach into the cultural fabric of, beyond just using English for the platforms. And quite a few, but only about 40% had case studies where they were celebrating success of their platform, which was quite surprising. And only 40% had a guide which helped to show how to use the platform. So it's very much a variance in the different elements that the platforms could offer. And going on to look at the targeted users, so most of the platforms were looking at multiple, so a third were looking at different users, although another third was looking at either local or regional government. So lots of them were very focused on government, and there were a few other platforms that were targeting other user groups explicitly. But the size of the user groups ranged from being quite small and tight-knit to less than 100, and so there was some that which had an even more of a bigger reach, up to like over 10,000. So it very much depended on what the platform reach was, whether it was global or regional as well. As I said, only 10% had a paid for feature. with some offering a hybrid, but primarily 71% of these platforms were free to use. So to summarize our findings on the platforms that we looked at, we found that there are definitely trade-offs between being context sensitive and having a higher level analysis of, say, the SDGs at the global level. The SDGs are becoming a stabilization of an institutionalized discourse. So in a way that's positive, because the world is hopefully gearing up to having a particular standard set of goals that they're all reaching to, and that helps to have shared discourses and shared actions. But also there are other complexities, because you have multi-level governance, different actor priorities, different institutional logics. These can all generate tensions as well as opportunities for collaboration and alignment. There's still an inherent bias in trans-regional innovation, so the fact that English platforms are prominent and the global south is underrepresented, these are going to affect how data can be used properly in a way that is able to really get into the ins and outs of how and why sustainability transitions occur in different regions, particularly in areas like that have got less in digital infrastructure. Platforms generally aren't looking at the kind of quite exciting potential to look at the deeper patterns of how and why things are happening. Why are people in certain areas doing particular actions, or why are they not doing them in another place? So how can you get a platform to actually help build theory with academics, with practitioners, with communities, so that it's not a kind of AI-driven model on developing inferences from, you know, what it thinks it's finding, but actually it really is informed by people sharing information, people debating whether or not something is valid, and helping to monitor and analyze the conditions that prevent or support sustainable action. And co-productive processes are necessary to generate solutions, but also to encourage latent practices to be brought to the surface. So there may be some interesting potential that where resources could be supported to harness, for instance, there may be a group with an idea or an individual with an idea, but they feel that they are disempowered or they don't have the resources to make things happen. So if you had a digital platform that could really help people to kind of vocalize what they think should happen, so ideas, but also get people to support that person with resources and really help them to bring their ideas to life. So we have some recommendations, which is to build an integrative platform that can leverage existing content from multiple platforms. So this was more around the kind of orchestration idea. This can help provide additional functionality because it can possibly help accelerate local to global actions. So if you had one compendium, for instance, that was developed within one digital sustainability platform, and it could somehow speak to another compendium, so that those two compendiums were stronger together, and they could actually use their information, their data in ways that could become more synergistic and enable a greater reach, a greater level of insight, and also to help them grow in a better way so that they could learn from each other what was working and what wasn't working. The correlation of actor and system characteristics can also help to provide insights. So who is doing what the configurations of their particular system, how is it working, how does this relate to governance, how does it relate to resources, so you can kind of map the system actor qualities that create barriers and institutional lock-ins, and also the potential to unlock these. So we think there should be a deepening of an integration of scholarship and practice through the creation of sustainable knowledge action platforms this is where local actors and academics can help share and adapt and customize solutions. And also very important is the idea of incentives, because if you're not incentivized to document your information, your knowledge, you haven't got a reason to share information with other people in different places, or maybe you do, but you don't have the time. If there was a mechanism or an incentive that could override some of the kind of more behavioral blockages to sharing knowledge and action, then this would be good. So there's something that I've written about called regenerative value, which is how if you kind of have a value that was created through all different actions being able to be logged towards having an actual sustainable benefit, then that could then be traded and exchanged through the platform system to help encourage people to act even more in sustainable ways if you are rewarded to act sustainably in the first place. So the next slide is what we are suggesting as areas for future research. So we think that the global digital transformation could happen through data-driven innovation being embedded in national and local knowledge managed systems. Although more work is required to think about what mechanisms would be needed for such a global platform to be effectively regulated, while at the same time being a user-driven approach. Again, there needs to be more detail on how incentives can be tailored to be used in different contexts. Could you have a universal greening incentive? Might it only work in some cultures or with some types of people? How could you really embed that into public procurement and things like that? So that is what we are thinking is a really good way to think about how to implement some of the ideas that we've looked at, particularly looking at pathways and trajectories and thinking about how data can inform those kind of approaches. So the next element of our presentation is looking at the idea that we've put together of the Sustainability Action Platform. So we have thought about different elements that could work well, given the findings that we've had on what's lacking in the sustainable knowledge action platform scene. So we think if there could be a self-assessment tool and we could have peer-to-peer driven sustainability action and advice, connectivity and networking, documenting ideas and inspiration in an ideas bank for somebody else to pick up and take forward, having a library of case studies. So these aren't just, you can have quite basic case studies which would appeal to anybody who's not an expert in the field, but also kind of you could have really in-depth theoretical case studies as well, which could be used to inform academic research and help to also inform the more kind of data-driven side of things, which could be machine learning in terms of how could you help, how could like researchers and machines kind of coexist to co-produce sustainability transitions literature, for instance? Is that something that is desirable? How could that happen? So I think there's a conversation to be had with other researchers looking in this area in terms of how could that happen, and is it desirable? There could also be a repository and advisory service between scientists and local government, where you could put academics in contact with local government, for instance, who are keen to build a particular climate risk framework or something like that, so that you could really kind of stop the ivory tower that may be perceived between practitioners and academics. You may want to embed a consultancy element where you could have a paid for service, because the thing is, if this is going to be developed, then who is going to pay for it? Is it going to be something that gets a large grant, or is it something that becomes self-sufficient in its own way? There's also obviously the role for cutting edge digital technology like blockchain, visual analytics, This could help enhance also having a peer populated compendium, so enabling people to log what they've done in their community, what's worked, why it's worked, and again, like if there was an orchestration of these different compendiums across platforms, then it would strengthen the offer of the information available. There's also a lot of potential peer-to-peer sustainability action advice. So it's kind of lessening the expert-driven nature of some sustainability advisory services by making it really grassroots. So you could have a local councillor in one area talking to one in another. This could be, maybe in the same continent, or maybe in the same county or state, or it could be encouraging collaboration from completely different areas but on a similar topic. There could be an ideas bank, so somebody could log an idea that they have and they want to see happen, but they might not know how to do it, they might not have the resources, so this would help with that. Having a library of case studies, so these could be in simple terms for anyone to read, or they could be more in-depth academic ones which could help inform theory. You could also encourage scientific knowledge to be closer to local councils. So for instance, if an academic has worked on a paper through the platform, they could share their experiences, and rather than just reading the paper, it could help connect to a greater extent to bridge divides between maybe the academic community and the practitioner community. There could be an element of expert consultancy or user paid services. It depends how the model is funded, whether it's grant funding or an organisation backs it, or a foundation, or whether it needs to be more self-sufficient on its own terms. So having a consultancy element might help with that. There are cutting edge digital technologies that could be used. So for instance, AI and algorithms, visual analytics. There's lots of very exciting data technologies out there, which I must confess that I am not an expert in, but I'm sure that there are many people in this room who are, and we can discuss hopefully in the session, the Q&A, how these kind of innovations could be used to realise something like this. As I said before, around you can kind of customise your indicator sets. So you could have the information being able to be reporting onto the SDGs, or you might have a kind of local level organisational set of indicators that you want to work on and progress. So having the platform being able to kind of, through, for instance, AI, if you could show a similarity score, or if you had an indicator bank and then you were able to kind of say, okay, well, this shows a match. Would you like to consider this indicator? Yes, no. And then the data fields of the different indicators could be compared and mapped, so that you could kind of like at a hit of a button, you could report on one particular element or another. And this is something that I actually worked on in a previous role. So it's a very exciting, if not time-consuming way of doing things, but I think there is such a plethora of information, indicator frameworks out there, that some kind of consolidation of this is possible. If not, need to also do some more stakeholder engagement work on the desirability of customization versus standardization, because obviously there are debates to be had with that one. So that is basically the model of SAP that we were thinking of. And so we've got some questions which we were wanting to kind of take to the room. And of course, there might be questions for us as well. So we just wanted to know, do you use a platform? If so, what features do you find most useful? What features would you like to help you in terms of capturing your transitions towards sustainable action? How easy do you think it might be for different sustainability frameworks and indicators to be synthesized? What are some of the benefits and challenges of the localization of the SDGs in your experience? How might emerging digital technologies help to integrate multiple platforms and data sets? Who should have access to the data, and how would data protection be considered when you have so many different rules and laws in different places? How to kind of meet the issue of data sharing and inclusion of the global north and global south when things are so uneven in terms of access to data, education, infrastructure. What is the best strategy for enlisting and sustaining users worldwide? Is the orchestration model a good one, or should we seek to already work with something that is already fledgling or even more established, like for instance the UN Local 2030 Agenda Hub? What else is needed to integrate information and develop a hub for local actors globally? So there's some questions that we just wanted to throw out there. This is a list of some of the sustainability platforms that we've reviewed. And this is the contact details for our research team. So please do get in touch if you have any questions, and we'd love to hear from you. And I look forward to your questions in the Q&A. Thank you.